All right, it is time to get started. Hi, folks. Hello. Thank you for tuning in. So, this is the weekly tarot stream, as I'm sure y'all know. I was thinking about what I wanted to do this week, what I wanted to examine or talk about, and most people who know even a little bit about tarot know that there's kind of a story to the Major Arcana, right? Hi, Matricula. Hello. Welcome. Welcome to you and Matricula's mom. Hi. So most folks who use tarot even somewhat know that there's kind of a narrative to the Major Arcana, whether that's a big deal for you or not. It's a thing. And there's certainly a lot we could talk about with the Major Arcana, the big named cards. Thank you. I like this top, and I appreciate that. It's gonna make me blush. But yeah, certainly a lot to talk about with those big cards, the Major Arcana cards that talk about big archetypal stuff in our world. But at the same time, I feel like the fact that they talk about such big things in some ways makes them easier for me made them easier for me at least to understand. And there are a lot more of the Minor Arcana cards, the cards that have numbers and suits to them. And when, your mom is way too sweet, Matricula. Thank you very much. Well, I'm gonna give myself a chance to cool my blushing and have a sip of wine. So, right, for those who may be entirely new to tarot, there are two basic kinds of cards in the deck. The vast majority of the cards in the tarot deck belong to the Minor Arcana, and those cards are cards that talk about kind of life stuff. Each card talks about a fairly specific thing or characteristic or moment or action. And maybe it's hard and maybe it's easy and maybe it's fun and maybe it's not. But it's all kind of life stuff. The stuff that makes up life. And so the Minor Arcana talks about more specific things. And they're organized into 4 suits, like our playing cards. What those suits are called kind of varies depending on the deck. And they have, ace through 10, and then court cards, like kings and queens. The Major Arcana are what we might call, if the word hadn't been so thoroughly tainted, trumps. So back in the day, when the tarot deck was used to play a game kind of like bridge, when it was used as playing cards, if you had one of the Major Arcana cards in your hand, that trumped everything else, right? So in gameplay, these were literally the most powerful cards. In divination, this set of cards, thank you for that host, Matricula, I really appreciate it. In divination, this set of cards, the Major Arcana, is still in some ways more powerful because it's a sequence of cards. It starts with the Fool and ends with the World, and they're cards that have their own names, like the Fool, like the Magician, like Death, and they talk about kind of big concepts, big archetypal shit that is bigger than we are, right? Things that we may participate in, but that isn't quite the stuff of life that the Minor Arcana talks about. So in some ways, the fact that the Major Arcana is so big made it easier for me to understand and get my brain around. But the Minor Arcana, there's a lot going on there. There are a lot of cards. There's a lot to remember. It's a lot to memorize. So I started thinking about, how did I do that? How did I do that? And part of that for me was thinking about, well, what do all the numbers have in common? Like, what do all the aces have in common across the suits? What do all the 2s have in common? What do all the 8s have in common? Some it's easier to see than others, but they're kind of connecting threads that helped me remember, okay, this is a 3, and it's a 3 of this particular suit, so it probably has something to do with blah. Because I can remember rules a lot better than I can remember specifics. So thinking about a set of rules and guidelines really helped me with the Minor Arcana. Hey Ravens from Snow, thank you so much for that host. I really appreciate it. Yay. So tonight, I thought maybe I'd share some of that with you, and it's a nice excuse to play compare the decks and look at some deck artwork as well. And I thought we'd look at, start at the beginning. Thought we'd look at the aces from the 4 suits and think about what aces as a type of card do. And that's a good kind of jumping off point to think about what the characteristics of the suits are as well. So we're kind of hitting 2 birds with 1 stone. So to start us off, I pulled the aces out of 4 of my decks tonight because, I wanted the 3 that I normally read from, that y'all normally see on here. But since we're doing comparative stuff, I also felt like it was a good idea to bring in kind of the standard deck. So we've got the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. We've got Crowley's Thoth deck. We've got the Wooden Tarot deck. And we've got the Numinous Tarot deck. We're going to be looking at the aces from all of those. So we're starting with the aces of discs, or in some decks this is called coins or pentacles. I like independent decks. So we have Ace of Pentacles, Ace of Discs, Ace of Tomes or books, and the God of Bones, because my decks are all over the place. But all of these are essentially the same card in different decks. And they're all the ace, or the first card in the suit that that's associated with the element of earth, and so deals with all kinds of material stuff. This is the suit that focuses on finances, on home life, like the physical aspects of having a home, having a place, logistics of time management, and our bodies, our health, anything physical and material is what this suit focuses on. Now, aces in general in the tarot deck. So this suit focuses on the element of earth, focuses on material things. The ace of this suit focuses on, it talks about the pure, undiluted power of the physical. Whether that's the pure power of money to make our way in the world easier, or whether that's the power of what our bodies are capable of, or the power of having like non-monetary wealth, having a store of resources to draw from. That's what this talks about. And all the aces, we're going to see this, all of the aces in all of the suits deal with the power of their suit, the power of the element they represent, in very much the same way. I've heard some people talk about aces as an offering card. You're being offered an opportunity, and we can see that here. This is offering you that big yellow coin, like Matricula says. Yeah. So saying, here are some resources. What are you gonna do with it? But as we've seen before in some of our deck comparisons, not all decks take the same approach. So again, the kind of standard deck is very much a, here you go, have a thing. By contrast, the Ace of Discs in the Thoth deck, this is a little blurry and I'm having trouble getting my camera to focus well. We've still got that big yellow coin, but it's in the center of like some very intense cherub wing type things. And so this has more of a sense of, because it's Crowley, the as above so below bit, on earth as it is in heaven bit, of actualizing the spiritual, of having the physical resources to actualize, to make physical the things that may have only been in your head, to bring into the physical world things that previously weren't. So it feels like a different emphasis here to me. And then the God of Bones from the Wooden Tarot deck is a totally different approach, right? Hi, Crafty. Hello, welcome. We're looking at the aces in my tarot decks, and starting with the Ace of Earth, whatever it calls itself. So in this deck, the aces are called gods, and that kind of makes sense to me because like I said, the aces are the kind of primal and undiluted power of whatever the suit is about. So yes, it's not just showing you one aspect of what you can do. Yeah, it's pretty intense. This is my creepiest deck, really. Lots of bones. Except that it's pointed downward. The Masonic eye, I believe, is pointed upward, I think. But this one is pointed downward because... Oh, hi Dom Dude! Yay! It's a party! The triangle on this one is pointed downward because Earth is considered a feminine element So we do not have the triangle pointed upward, which would be a phallic symbol, but instead it's pointed downward in a more vulvic implication. So yeah, and this gets into some of the tarot can be super binary, especially in the older decks. Oh, Lizard Eats Flies, thank you for that, host. That's awesome. I feel so loved. Hi. Hello. We're just going over the aces in my decks and starting off with the Ace of Earth. Right. Yes, folks. Hey, Matricula, could you shout out Lizard Eats Flies for us? Because the background music that is happening behind here is all Lizard Eats Flies. It is all Elizabeth Lane, and she is awesome. But yeah, so again, very different take. This feels much more controlling to me, less offering and more controlling. Oh, yay! Thank you, Matricula. Thank you for working on those shout-outs. And then finally, the Ace of Tomes. Hey, Click! Yay! Welcome! The Ace of Tomes from the Numinous Tarot deck is... I feel like we're back to the opportunity here. Offering you this volume, offering you a journey. The thing that stands out to me most about this card is the Labyrinth on the front. So it's not just offering you, money or physical resources. It's offering you resources and a journey to go on to learn how to use them. This is just the beginning. You have to open the book. You have to walk the path. You have to venture on in. And I love this. I love this whole deck, but I love this interpretation of the card in particular. And y'all, please feel free to ask questions, throw questions up in the chat if and as you have them. My goal here is to try and bring a little bit of clarity to the way that the Minor Arcana is organized and gets interpreted through the aces tonight. But sometimes I glance over things. So please feel free to jump in if I jumped over something that you'd like me to address. So that's Earth, the material stuff, the physical stuff, what do we have to work with and how can we work with it in the world as it is now, as it is. So moving on, and we can come back if anyone's got questions later. From Earth to Air. So most of the time, mostly traditionally, Air is associated with the suit of swords, or in the so these suits also kind of roughly correspond to playing card suits, if that helps you. The cards we just looked at would correspond to diamonds, because diamonds come from the earth, right? Excuse me. These would correspond to spades, because spades are the spades in the playing card deck are pointy and the most bladey thing in the in the playing card deck. So swords are usually associated with air. Sometimes they're associated with fire, but I think those people are wrong, because you hear about a burning will and a cutting intellect. So, Crafty, so I'm not a tarot historian. I think I remember that they kind of evolved alongside each other as just kind of a different deck. Because, I mean, playing cards, tarot cards were originally playing cards. You played a game kind of like bridge with them. And the Major Arcana were trump cards. Ugh. I feel gross every time I say that. The triumphs. The triumph cards. So they kind of... It's my understanding that various varieties on playing cards kind of co-evolved. You say that now, Crafty. You say there's nothing more phallic than a sword. Just you wait, all right? Just you wait. Anyway, so yes, we have this fairly phallic sword here, piercing this crown. Hi, R. Hello. I hope everyone is having a wonderful evening. Right. So, swords, and here, air, the element of air. As I like to tell the folks I'm reading for, it talks about our brains, our minds, our intellect. It can be a lot about inspiration, about beliefs, about thought processes, and on the shadow side, like, this is the deck where the suit where anxiety issues come up, where we have to talk about our negative thought patterns, have to look at our negative thought patterns. So, you know, every suit has its good side and its, you know, shadow or things we'd rather not deal with side. But here, you know, we're being offered the sword, being offered all this power of intellect to see through the bullshit, to cut the crap, literally, yeah, with the blade, yeah. To have a keen edge of imagination and inspiration, and to go forth with that and go do something beautiful with it. And so that's kind of what we have in the traditional deck. In the Crowley deck, we've still got that very phallic sword, still piercing a rayed crown. Yeah. So the crown in both of these, I think, is partially an excuse to show penetration of the phallic symbol into something, but also showing I know, lizard eats flies, I know, right? Who would have thought it? Who would have thought it? I need an adult. Well, you should have had to click the I know that this is a mature channel thing, lizard eats flies. You were warned. Is that Tea of Flutes? Plumes. We'll get there, I promise. Plumes. But yeah, I also think that the crown is about sovereignty, about authority in a kind of reductive, head over heart kind of way. That, because there are also arguments among white Western dude magician types about which element is on top, which element is superior, what is the definitive ranking of the 4 classical elements. Is fire or air the top element? So I think that part of this is saying that right. Well, penetrating authority like a rebel, penetrating sovereignty like a colonizer. So we'd rather be right, Crafty, right. Why does there have to be a top? Granted, I like it when there's a top, but my tarot doesn't need that in it. Anyway, so very similar, very different colorway and feel. And then what Liz was asking about and what Kim was noting, we've got in the wooden tarot the God of Plumes. So he's holding a feather here. And we've got the, as we noted, upright triangle. Yeah, I like plumes as a suit as well. It's very airy and it has quill associations for the writing, the inspiration. It's light, it floats, but it can also be the fletching for an arrow. It can support some of that cutting through the bullshit energy as well. So again, this doesn't feel so much like an offering to the querent as a, here's this power, what are you going to take and do with it? Yeah, it's kind of an acquired taste, Crafty. At first, I really loved some of the cards, and I really didn't like others, and I've gotten to like it more as a whole in the intervening time. And then, yeah, the minimalist deck, Matricula, the wooden tarot deck. And then the Ace of Bells in the numinous deck. This comes back a little bit to this feels very inviting to me. It's a lot of warm colors. It's still very airy because we're out in space here. We're out in the clouds. But there's this big reverberating like sound of creation here. This makes me think logos. This makes me think the word. The word, the idea, the way that our ideas lead to creation. And to me, this is much more of a nurturing and evocative kind of inspiration, kind of use of intellect, right, than the more violent imagery with the swords of cutting through. Not that one doesn't need that occasionally, because sometimes one needs the cut, but letting one pure note cut through the noise feels a lot better to me than thinking about actual cutting. Yeah, this whole deck is really warm. Ooh. Yes, Crafty. So the Laurel, I'm sure you know, the Laurel is about victory, right? In contests in ancient Greece, be they athletic contests or poetic contests or theater contests, whatever they were, if they were contests dedicated to a god, which most of them were, the winner would be crowned with that god's special plant, right? So if it was a contest dedicated to Zeus, you'd get a crown of oak leaves as the victor. Apollo's special plant was the laurel. And so that's become the iconic one, Crafty. It's become the iconic one because Apollo had a lot dedicated to him. Like, he's a god who really values excellence. So there were a lot of contests for him. So the laurel became, God, I don't remember if it's synecdoche or metonymy, but the one that the laurel became symbolic of victory in general. And then, thank you, Lizard. I always get those confused. My 11th grade AP English teacher is shaking her head. And the palm, right now, because I've been talking so much about saints in my travelogue, I'm thinking of the martyr's palm, but it's also a victory symbol. The palm of victory, and it became associated with martyrs because in that theology, you won the palm, the martyr's palm, by your victorious martyrdom. So, long story short, too late. They're both symbols of victory. I'm sorry, Matricula. I don't remember what command I created. Was it the SJB? Yeah. There's the Discord. For anyone who would like to come play and ask me questions at another time as well. Yeah, nothing really ambivalent. The aces are not subtle. Some of the other cards, there's a little more, the aces are not very subtle. It's right out there, right out in front of you. So, next, we're not going masculine, feminine elements because we're going around the circle instead. So, we'll be going to the fire element. So Crafty, there's nothing more phallic than a sword, you say. So, this is the Ace of Wands. Yes, it's a penis spouting leaves because growth and life and the vital force. Yeah. So this is the suit of fire. They're pretty good clouds. They're pretty good clouds. Well, okay. So to be fair, Crafty, they are kind of just swords for poor kids, and I think this is part of why the old white magician dudes came down on the side of swords and air are the top of the elemental hierarchy, because clubs are blunt force. Swords are a precision instrument, right? Swords cost more, swords require more skill. Anyone can smack something with a club, right? And no, lizard eats flies. In this classroom, snickering like a 12-year-old gets you extra credit, so go right ahead. So this suit, this is about the blunt, unsubtle power of passion, willpower, desire. All those things I describe it as our gut, the things that fire us up, that drive us to get shit done, to transform stuff, to change stuff, to put our willpower into action. Right. So again, here we're being offered that power, being encouraged to grab hold of it and use it for our own. Anyway. And exactly, yeah. When air moves, you may or may not notice it. If there's fire moving in front of you, you are aware of it. You are aware of it. And the air is, around us all the time. If we had fire around us all the time, we'd be really unhappy. Yes. Kim, it's funny how definite the hand is when the clouds are kind of just there. Yeah. So maybe it's smoke, but all of the Rider-Waite aces are done in this same style, right? They're all a disembodied hand holding out the symbol of the suit for us, coming out of clouds or smoke or whatever. If you've seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, I always think of this as Lizard Eats Flies, I absolutely will. But I always think of this, of the kind of the little animation sequences with hands randomly coming out and like medieval marginalia being animated, and all of that. So I think it's partially to show that this is a force in and of itself. So in Western magic traditions, right, you have gods or God, you have maybe angels and demons, you have maybe land spirits, all kinds of different powers. But you also have elementals, powers that are strictly tied up with one of the elements. And to me, that's what it feels like the disembodied hand is getting at here. Like this is coming straight from fire. The powers of fire, straight from them, no intermediary. So that's what it feels like to me. So very different this time. The Ace of Wands in the Thoth deck. Whenever I look at this one, I always think it's the 10 instead of the 1, instead of the ace, because there are 10 little yods. It's supposed to be the Hebrew letter yod because Aleister Crowley was a mess, is what he was. But he was very big into ceremonial magic that used Hebrew names of God. So these are 10 yods positioned like the Sapphira in the Kabbalistic tree of life. And there's a lot going on with this. But it's still about, there's a lot of energy here. The overwhelming impression when I look at this card is all this energy, all this heat, what am I going to do with it? How am I going to burn this off? This is honestly the one that feels the most intense to me. Like, if you're not careful, you'll get overwhelmed, you'll burn out, and it might happen quickly. So, God of Stones. In this deck, stones are fire, bones were earth, stones are fire, and that really bugged me until I was like, well, so how did we make fire before matchboxes? We hit two stones together. We hit two stones together to get a spark. All right. Okay. I can roll with stones being fire. He also has a strong association of antlers with fire, and I'm not quite sure I get that personally. Really personally, deer, horned animals are not necessarily something. Oh, yes, absolutely, Crafty. Good catch there. There were absolutely 6 yods on the Ace of Swords and the Rider-Waite Smith. And yes, you can go a long way with just looking at Hebrew letters, and Kabbalah intersections with tarot, because a lot of people have done a lot with it. I personally think that I'm not Jewish, so I don't do much with the Kabbalah. But a lot of other people do. And the symbolism is definitely there if you look for it. But yeah, so again, we've got the God of Stones. He's got some fire behind him, just in case we were uncertain about what this card is doing or what this card is about. And I guess, now that I'm thinking about it, I guess the antlers, the horn associations with stones and fire might be a bit of a phallic thing. I don't know. And then the Numinous Tarot got the Ace of Candles. So one of the things that I love about this deck is how, so it's created by a queer, non-binary, asexual practitioner. So there's a lot less of the binaries. There's a lot less of the just like super overt sexual metaphors all through this particular deck, which in some ways opens up some space for it to be a lot more beautiful and a lot more complex. It does kind of look like chocolate birthday cakes. They're sunflowers, but now I want chocolate cupcakes and sunflower seeds at the same time. But this card still feels like, I don't know, all the drippy candles in this deck, for me, feel pretty phallic. But not in the same, like, violent masculinity way, right? It feels very queer phallic in a, I don't know. It feels different, but it still feels kind of sexual to me. But I know that's me. That's probably not what the author intended. But one of the things I love about this is that it emphasizes the focus. Not the blunt force, but the focus. The way that, no, we're not spent, click. See, it's burning. It's burning. It's got a lot to go. Maybe drippy, but it's burning. So it emphasizes the focus and the light that having a focused purpose, having a direction for our willpower can shed. It always makes me think of this card makes me think of using a candle flame for meditation, narrowing our will, narrowing our intention to one point so that we can effectively apply our will and actualize this thing. When we narrow down our desires, narrow down our goal, then we can affect change and transformation. So that's part of what this interpretation in particular says to me. And like most of the other cards in this deck, it's really warm and lovely, and I love it. So finally, we end with water. And as we've said before, not subtle. This is not subtle. So water is about our hearts. It's about our hearts. About the things that make us cry with joy or sadness, about our emotions, our emotional health. It may be about like memory and heritage as well. The folks who have formed us, there tends to be some stuff about ancestors and lineage in this suit. But the Ace of Cups is about overflowing. It's about the tidal force of our emotions, about the moments when we're overcome or just completely filled up with whatever it is that we're feeling. This can also have a creative aspect, because so much art, so much of what we make comes out of our emotions. So sometimes the overflow is in the song we wrote, or in the way that we dance, or in the way that, in the piece we wrote, in the pottery we created. So I tend to think of art a lot with this suit too. Now clearly, in this one, there's a strong emotion and spirituality. Yeah. Although you will notice that the dove is getting ready to put the host in the chalice. And now technically those are two female symbols, feminine, as binaries go. But there's still a preparation for insertion. Yes, matricula. Yes. So, but this one, as these things go, is pretty chaste, and it's an emphasis on communion, both religious and interpersonal. The ways that we join up, the ways that we kind of flow into each other, sometimes losing a little bit of ourselves at times. The ways that we participate in each other. But it is very chaste and almost orthodox here in this suit. By contrast, we have the overflowing on the good drugs interpretation of the Ace of Cups here. When I give the like nutshell description of my decks to people that I'm reading for so that they can choose, I'm always thinking of this card when I tell them that this deck has some pretty intense psychedelic imagery. Yeah. So we've got the broad uterine cup with the fallopian tube handles down to the lotus from which it springs, and a channel running all the way through it, if you can see that, both out and up. So this is a container, but it's also a conduit, allowing the flow of energy and power and, yes, crafty, opium and no doubt other things were a hell of a drug. And I don't doubt that Crowley used the hell out of them all. But the thing I like about this, so it's hard to see, especially because my camera won't quite focus on it. But there's not a triscale, but the 3 circles intersecting. Triquetra on the cup as well. And that's a very stereotypically feminine thing to do too. Is 3 is the maiden, the mother, and the crone, and so forth and so on. But it also gets at the Trinity, the magic of 3s. And yeah, I don't know, and I don't study the symbolism of this deck intensely enough to venture any other thoughts on that, but it is there. And so out of all of them, this one to me has the most, you may be in for something that is going to knock you over. There's no riding this wave. There's only falling down with it and then picking yourself back up. And you should just try and be gentle with yourself while that happens. So, the last of our gods, as you can see, we're back to a downward pointing triangle because water is a feminine element in the binary systems. And so this is the god of blooms, because Lotus is water. Lotuses are natural vessels that look like other things that are also compared to vessels. Ballless. So he's holding his little pink lotus here, and draped in more watery colors. Yes, exactly, crafty. Sweet peas, lotuses, all the genitals. So, very much in line with the others in that deck. And then, in the Numinous Tarot deck, we have the Ace of Vials. And I love the energy of this one. It's got a similar, to me, amount of energy as the Crowley deck, but this feels way less knock you down overwhelming and way more exciting. Yeah, so we've got the Lotus both down here and as a backdrop to the Vial. The Vial is a much more neutral, sexually neutral symbol, than the kind of broad uterine cup that we see in Crowley's deck, or even the chalice in the Waite-Smith deck. I don't know if you can tell, but there's a lily pond as the backdrop. So Matricula, the irises of the eyes, I was actually just noticing that as I was pulling them out. The iris for the stones is gray. The iris for plumes is greeny hazel. And the iris for bones is blue. And the iris for this one is kind of golden, ambery. And they don't seem to line up like I would expect. They're kind of contrasting colors to their suits' colors. I'm not sure just how much symbolism the author of the deck intended there. If it was just a nice visual contrast, or they had some deeper idea behind it. But yeah, I like the feeling that there's so much going on in here, that there's been so much contained in here that it like pops the cork and just goes everywhere. Yeah. And then all foamy down here. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of the way that the aces so Crafty, I think there's a glow inside the vial and then a normal like white thread wrapped around it. That's the way I see it, at least. But there's definitely some glow happening in the middle. But I think it's the vial that's glowing, not the thread. Although you could see it either way. Mine is not the definitive interpretation. Just mine. But yeah, I hope this helps give an idea of the way that the aces kind of set the tone for their suit. The way that they establish what the suit is about, what it's doing, and the way that, so like the next time you're reading for yourself or you're getting a reading and you have an ace pop up, know that whatever it is, this is not subtle. This is not subtle. You're being handed, like, even if it's a sword, you're being handed a very clear object, a very clear set of energies to do things with. Thank you, Crafty. This was a lot of fun. Because I do think that seeing how all the same numbers of a suit are similar, I think I may kind of continue in this vein for a while. So next week we'll probably be talking about the twos, which means we get to talk a lot about balance. It's always useful. So in a very rough way, people will say, and I've found this variably applicable, folks will say that numerology, at least Western numerology, corresponds to the suits in the tarot card, in the tarot deck, or the numbered cards in the tarot deck. So aces are ones, and ones are all about unity and wholeness, and like we saw here, the distilled power and qualities of what the suit does, what it's about. Twos are about balance, and so forth and so on. And I find that super valuable with the low numbers. I find it a little more complicated with the higher numbers, but it can still be helpful to me. So we'll continue in this vein for a few weeks. Let's see how that goes. And I really appreciate y'all being here. It's been a lot of fun to talk about, a lot of fun to show off my decks. And yeah, so my next stream before we get ready to go is Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to be doing centaur spotting in the wild. So some of the pictures from my journeys that I didn't have a whole lot specific to say about, but I wanted to share because they're weird or wacky or great. Thank you for being here, Ravens from Snow. Yes, Matricula, this one's for you. The stream Thursday is going to be for you, at least in part. And we'll look at centaurs and weird creatures and all kinds of cool shit. So I hope you'll join me. But for now, let's see. Since we have folks, who is on that we can raid? So there's stirred. Okay. I don't think I've heard Rehal 2, so let's do that. So put up my raid call and copy my own raid call. Okay, so we are raiding. Thank you all so much for being here. This was a lovely time. Yeah, thank you, Kuklik. Thank you, Dom Dude. This was a lovely, warm and fuzzy stream. I feel very loved. And thank you all so much. And I will hope to see some of you Thursday, or if not, next week for talking about balance with the twos.